In our last session, we spoke about as to how John placed himself right in the center of God's heart. He saw himself as the disciple whom Jesus loved. That became the foundation of his identity, and he went on to become one of the most influential men who have ever lived. He knew Jesus the best on the planet, and he was a pattern for those who followed him. Yet we have to ask, is that actually something which was normative? What about the Apostle Paul? Did he do the same thing? After all, there's no proof that Paul knew the words of Jesus when Jesus said in John chapter 15, verse 9, "Just as the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Abide in my love." Well, Paul did write a verse which speaks of his taking, if not that commandment seriously, the leading of the Spirit seriously in his life, which brought him into the same conclusion. Let's take a look here in Galatians chapter 2, verse 20. Galatians 2:20, Paul wrote, "I have been crucified with the Messiah, and it is no longer I who live, but it is the Messiah who lives in me. And the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself up for me." Here Paul is taking a specific formula which he uses twice in Ephesians chapter 5, who loved and gave himself up for. In the beginning of Ephesians 5, Paul says he loved us and he gave himself up for us. Later on in Ephesians chapter 5, it says that the Messiah loved the church and gave himself up for her. Listen, Paul takes that love which Jesus had for the entire body of the Messiah, and he applied it specifically to himself. He says the same love that Jesus has for the entire body, whether it be that which was present at the time he wrote it, throughout all of the centuries which has followed, the Messiah's church, whether it be in heaven or on earth, the same love that he has for the entire body, he had for the individual, Paul, who loved me and gave himself up for me. Now, with the Apostle John saying, "I am the disciple whom Jesus loved," we could say, well, yes, John, you knew him, you walked with him, you were present at his crucifixion, you were a witness of his resurrection, you are the one who had incredible intimacy with Jesus. But what about the rest of us? Can we say that we should abide in the love of Jesus in the same way that you did? Well, along comes Paul. Paul was nowhere around during the Messiah's earthly ministry. Perhaps he was studying with Gamaliel. We don't know what was going on with Paul. We do know this, though, that by the Spirit he had come to the same conclusion. John said, "I am the disciple whom Jesus loved." Paul says, "The Messiah loved me and gave himself up for me." If for Paul, then for you as well. If for Paul, then for me. Jesus somehow in eternity past knew each of us by name. He knew our hearts, he knew our desires, he knew the things that we had done. He knows our potential, he knows us just as we are, and he loved us. And loving us, he came and he deliberately gave himself up for us. Jesus said in Matthew chapter 10, verse 30, "But the very hairs of your head are all numbered." We should take the love of Jesus very specifically towards ourselves. We should make this a matter of our own meditation. When Jesus said, "The very hairs of your head are all numbered," he was not trying to say God knows everything about you. Everybody knows, everybody knew that God knows everything. But what Jesus was seeking to say was this: if you were a child lying in the arms of your father, perhaps resting, perhaps sleeping, maybe squirming, the Father would be loving you so much, this earthly Father would be loving you so much, that he would be counting each hair on your head. There's number 1, there's number 438, there's number 2032. Counting, numbering the hairs on your head because he just loves you. That Father loves that child so much. Well, your Father who is in heaven loves you in a way which is akin to that earthly father doting upon that child. He loves you so much, in fact, that when you are in the place of your greatest need, God became a man. The Son of the living God became the Son of Man, and he gave himself up for you. He died specifically just for you. This is a remarkable love, and you are called to meditate upon this. When I was a young believer, I would meditate upon Galatians chapter 2, verse 20. I would read it like this, because I was seeking to know deep things, and I was seeking to get victory, quote unquote, victory in my life over various aspects of my life. And I was seeking to become a fruitful disciple. And so I would read Galatians 2:20 in this manner. I have been crucified with the Messiah. And it is no longer I who live, but the Messiah lives in me. And the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in, or by the faith of, the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself up for me. Because everybody knew, even I knew, that he loved and gave himself up for each person. But Paul was leaving the best in that verse for last. Paul wrote, I have been crucified with the Messiah, and it is no longer I who live, but the Messiah lives in me. And the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself up for me. That was the climax of the verse. Not some sort of afterthought. Paul was captured by this one who loved him and gave himself up for him. Paul saw himself as clearly as John did as a disciple who was loved by Jesus. I encourage you to place yourself by faith right before the cross where the Messiah is being crucified, and so to speak, look into the Messiah's eyes and see this. He is saying, I love you. I am giving myself up for you. I love you that much. Think about it.